Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming your way with the market recap for the 16th of January. It is a Wednesday. We just kind of keep creeping up. A little more upward movement here today as the S&P briefly kissed its 50-period moving average, sold off a bit off of that, as we will see. A bunch of the banks, of course, as you guys know, came in either last night or this morning before the market opened. Overall, definitely the market responded pretty positively. Pretty strong day for banking stocks in general and for those specific banking stocks that had their earnings. So financials definitely led the way here today. Good afternoon, Abel. Good afternoon, Ed. Always great to see you guys. Welcome, everybody. Always a pleasure. Appreciate that you spend a little bit of time with me as the market day is coming to an end. We got more earnings. Of course we do. We are in earnings season. Nothing huge tonight after the close. S&P 500 companies, CSX, Kinder Morgan, and Alcoa are coming out after hours tonight. And then tomorrow before the open, we have Morgan Stanley, kind of the big name, a few of the regional banks, BBT, MTV, Key. So a few more banking stocks to see if we can continue that nice trend. Doing great, Abel. Great to see you, my friend. And I found you on Twitter, so you're like me, figuring it out. But you figured it out. So we'll see where these earnings take us. But a good solid, I think a good solid start. We're early, but certainly not a poor start to the earnings season. No doubt about it. Over in the S&P, it didn't really benefit tremendously from those financials stocks. We did drift up. We gapped up on the open, as you can kind of see here. Gapped up on the open, started to run a little bit, looking at a 15-minute time frame. Really spent much of the next little while, really until the end of the day, just kind of back and forth, not doing a whole heck of a lot. Tried a little bit of a break at the end of the day before some profit taking came in. So really closing pretty flat. Not a ton of movement here today on the intraday after that gap on the open. And there you go, Abel. Yeah, you and me both. I am no technological wizard, that's for sure. So over in the S&P, you can kind of see where we peaked out on the day. Makes a little bit of sense. Well, late in the afternoon, was that when we were going to try to push through that 50-period moving average? I mean, it could have been, but probably not, right? Great place to take some profits on the intraday, selling off of that. Still looking pretty solid. Those of you who know Coach Mark, looks like we may be developing, and again, we're early, a little bit of a pinch between our rising 9 and our still falling, but certainly flattening out 50-period moving average. So I definitely think another step to the bullish side of things. I think a clean break of the 50 would be a lot more bullish signal than inching our way through the 2600s, but certainly can't say it was not a little bit more bullish momentum in the S&P here today. Just not ready to run, but it's been an interesting fight. That's been an interesting fight at 2600. And good afternoon, Patricia. Great to see you. Over in NASDAQ, we did, of course, close that 50 yesterday, gapped up on the open, and really not much. Again, it was kind of one of those days. We've seen a lot of those days lately, right? After quite a bit of volatility, really flat throughout much of the trading day, not a whole lot of movement one way or the other over in the NASDAQ when we look at it on an intraday level. But certainly, again, just like our S&P, just another little bit of a signal from a bullish perspective, closing above that 50-period average over in the NASDAQ, and probably every bit as important, if maybe not even more so, kind of getting back above this range. This one was tougher than the S&P maybe, because S&P was 26, or thereabout. We had some, floors on the intraday. We had a low here. We weren't quite sure exactly where to place that low point on the NASDAQ. Not everyone was agreeing, I guess, where it should be. So getting back in there where we can all say, yeah, we are above that, should be a little bit of clarity. Certainly some room. Again, we talked about this before. Nobody knows the future, but if we can build and continue to build off of this momentum, even if it continues to be slow, we have some room, to run until we start to run into challenges. We've got a ways to go on all of our indexes as if they can break those resistance levels. Dow Jones still a little bit behind, still working towards this old floor, not quite making it up into its 50-period moving average here today, but much like the rest of the market, kind of inching forward slowly but surely. One thing I'm going to be interested in, and who knows how it's going to play out, but we're seeing it on the Dow, we're seeing it on the S&P, where we have that rising 9 short-term moving average with that falling and flattening 50 developing what Coach Mark and I often call a pinch. And that builds a little bit of pressure. I would like to see it maybe pull back a little bit, take another run and break out of that pinch if it wants to. That would be okay with me. We'll have to see. Not yet taking out resistance though. We did take out that nice number, that big 24,000, which I do think matters, but haven't taken out the old floor and have yet to at least challenge that 50-period moving average. Just a little bit behind over on the Dow Jones right now. And lastly, over on the Russell, very similar situation. We did try to break back above that, this old floor. And I think maybe you could argue that we did it. It would be a close call one way or the other. And you guys know me, I always want it to be clear. If Ed says yes and Patricia says no, I don't even know who to side with. We're close. We're right at that resistance. If we're above it, we are barely above it. But we did close above that 50 here today. Would certainly be a little bit of a bullish signal in my mind. Again, a little bit of room to go. I don't think you can say that we've broke out on the Russell yet personally, but another day close above it, I could easily change that tune, and some room to go until we get to our next level of resistance. So I'm going to continue to watch personally. I'm not ready to be in as a bull on the Russell yet, but I will interpret a break of that as a bullish signal if it is able to break through that and kind of mirror some of the other indexes that are a little bit ahead of it right now. So again, just one of those days where we just crept up. Right, good solid earnings definitely played at some part in the price action today, no doubt about it. But what was interesting is, the financials. I mean, they ran. I'm sure you guys saw some of them. They definitely ran, as we'll see when we look at their chart. But before we get there, over in the materials sector, not much of a day. We did show some upward movement off of that doji that we put in here yesterday. So we are developing what looks like a little bit of a bullish retracement situation over in the material sector. Since we topped out here last week, every day up until today, we put in lower highs and lower lows in doji form, showing a little bit of upward movement, creating a higher low and a higher high, not holding the higher high here today. But it looks like there maybe some money wants to come back into that. If we can take out today's high, should be a little room to go. Probably, and for me at least, probably into that 53 range, that old support, that trend line that we're going to be dealing with just a little more appreciation in price. Materials will be testing their downward trend line. Isn't going to take much, is not going to take much, but not too tremendous of a day from a price action perspective. Speaking of not too much of a tremendous day, energy continues to just hang out at that old floor. Another day, another doji. It's been hot, so none of us, I think what's happening is none of us are getting confirmation. It's been performing very well. I kind of like this as a bearish retracement, but we're not getting any confirmation. And I'm not going to jump in early, especially going against the momentum that we've seen develop in the energy sector and in crude. Nobody wants to be the first one in, right? And if we continue to hang out here, eventually one of two things is certainly going to happen. We're either going to break to the upside, presenting a little bit of a buy signal for us, or this week now of really, really sideways movement is going to give out to the downside. We're not getting any information today that we didn't need yesterday. So another really flat day as we continue to fight at that support, that old support currently, certainly a new level of resistance in the energy sector. Been an interesting run over there. Financials. And I don't know about you guys, but one thing, we've been talking and we talk a lot about this, is that space, financials broke out, when it broke here above 24, didn't really have a lot to challenge us until 25. And 25 was, of course, a challenge area, at least in my opinion. Did us a favor, though. Those earnings come in nicely. We gapped above that, so we didn't have to take it out the old-fashioned way, and ultimately tested it on the intraday as intraday support. And so pushing through on that strength of earnings, really, if we can hold this, and we're seeing, plenty of strength, and we still have some earnings in this area coming out this week, as we saw. Next stop probably realistically is 26. We've taken out some resistance levels, on the ETF, and certainly within certain stocks within this area. Keep an eye on how those earnings go. Let's see if this 25 ultimately develops as a support zone. That would be, something I would like to see if it does want to pull back. But really, as far as resistance, I don't see any until 26. So it looks like, much like we talked about a couple of weeks ago when we took out 24, really there's some room to run still over in the financial sector. One thing to kind of keep in mind is a lot of these things did gap up, showed really positive days. There may be some consolidation or even profit taking from some of those moves. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a little bit of retracement over here. I wouldn't mind it at all. Working back into the 25 or catching up to that 9 EMA, or maybe even the 20 if it took a little time. But a good day over there, good earnings. I mean, maybe not the greatest earnings in history, but across the board, fairly solid, at least I thought, in the financial sector. So it looks like a little room over there to run. Right now, on the opposite side, there's no room to run on industrials. Much like energy, we are still just hanging out. We are now 5 days in a row of this same intraday level of resistance. I don't know what to say about it, right? We got to wait till it breaks one way or the other. Now, the longer it consolidates up here, it's building up some pressure. At least that's how I kind of view things that are breaking. A lot of times you'll hear me say, if it can stay in this range for a week, then we'll talk. I say that all the time about natural gas, right? It just never does. I like it to kind of build up that pressure. If we are able to take this out, this can be an area with some room to run, in my opinion. We're not seeing it yet, though. At the end of the day, if no one's willing to buy here, sooner or later, it's going to be selling off, right? So I don't think, much like energy, we're still very much in the same place we were on Friday when we talked about the sectors, and such as life. And this is the type of market I like, where not everything is doing the same thing at the same exact time. It's okay to be consolidating in one area and breaking out in the other, and even breaking down in another. I'm all right with that type of price action myself. I'm sure you guys are okay with it too. In the technology sector, much like the NASDAQ, really weren't able to generate much momentum at all today, closing near the low of the day. No doubt about that, but not really doing anything wrong. I think we can say that we are, we did see upward movement after pushing through that old floor from back here. Really, again, much like yesterday, I don't really see any reason why we don't have a little more room to drift to the upside in technology. Personally, as we work into that falling 50, into that falling trend line, definitely we'll want to be keeping an eye on that. But certainly still some room to go, a little bit of room to go, in my mind, at least over in the technology sector as well. Not to my surprise, not that I'm always right. You guys know me, I'm wrong plenty of the time, just like everybody else. But I wasn't surprised that we kind of stalled out after working close to that 52. As we've talked a lot before, there was just significant price action, and we didn't test it a lot of times. But I mean, that was a steep sell-off and a really solid bounce. So that 52 continues to be the number for me. It's got to get above 52 before I'm willing to go bullish personally, and it's got to go below 51 before I go bearish. So right now, I like the way this is setting up for future trades, not necessarily this week trades. I mean, it could break out tomorrow, right? It's still Wednesday. There's a little time, but I would think it would be maybe nice if we stayed in this range, 51, 52 range for a bit, let some of those stocks in that staple sector turn out a little bit, and then break one way or the other. I don't really care which way. To be honest with you, I would be happy to see them break to the downside or the upside. So, but really, I think our numbers continue to be the same: 51 on the support, 52 on resistance. I think at least 52 deserves a fair amount of respect. I know not everyone agrees with me there, and that's okay. But for me, I have not changed my opinion at all on the staple sector, nor the utilities. We did see some price appreciation over there, nothing huge. We are seeing PCG getting kicked out of the S&P 500, being replaced with a medical device company. I think TDX is their symbol, I believe. They do some medical devices. So we won't be able to have PCG drag us down anymore in the very near future. That'll happen on Friday. Here today in the sector, we did see a little more price appreciation, but we're still very much in that same little range that we have been working with for a little bit of time now. So for me, again, it's above 53.50. It's above this resistance level, or it's below 51.50. I think both of those are signals that would be potentially tradable. Whether it's a break to the up or a break to the downside, I have no idea which way utilities is ultimately going to break. But I do think both of those could be potential signals for me, at least. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow, and I'll probably say the exact same thing. Those of you who have just joined us recently on the recap, you won't remember how our life was back in October, but I said that every day on utilities, right? We were always saying the same thing. You guys were probably tired of me saying it, but hey, it's not my fault utilities go sideways for an extended period of time, all right? So over in healthcare, saw some decent movement early, working back into that 89 that we've been keeping an eye on, using that as our intraday resistance, selling off of that, fairly steep. I mean, not anything major, but maybe by today's standards, we saw a little more selling over here than we did in some other areas. I don't think that should be terribly shocking. We've seen some serious price action at that 89 level within this sector. Great place to take some profits. Overall, this is an area I find very appealing. If we can push through that 89 and that 50-period moving average, you guys, again, those of you who know me know I like healthcare, and it's one of the areas that I like to trade personally. I would like to see that happen, but really not a lot has changed, right? We know where that resistance is. One more day of testing is all that we have here today. We continue to hold our higher highs and higher lows. Overall positive momentum within the sector. Some profit taking as we approach some levels of resistance that were, identifiable, I think, at least. So no huge surprise. Ideally, I'd like to see a little bit of a pullback, run up, break, drop down a day or two, work into it Monday, Tuesday, break next Wednesday. And well, that would probably be very interesting to me if I can get it. And we'll see. We'll see. Probably shouldn't hold our breath, but maybe. Over in the discretionary, tough call. We did take out on the intraday that previous that high point that we were kind of dealing with. Again, when it comes to trend lines, we're going to be the same. Certainly, better be in the same ballpark, but may not be the exact same numbers. We've kind of been consolidating at that trend line, trying to push through it. Briefly pierced that high point of our swing from last week on the intraday, ultimately giving up, closing below that resistance level. For me, we need to take that level out. I will recognize that as a buy signal personally if we can do that with expectations of working into the 108 range in the sector ETF at least. I'm not going to be surprised though if we get pushed down. I'm not quite convinced that we've broken this trend. I don't think you can say that we have. Personally, again, there's going to be a little gray area there. I understand that. I don't think we've clearly broke out of that. I think our signals are going to be above the high that we put in last week and the low that we put in back last week. And for me, I think we can trade either way, whichever way it breaks. I think that would be a tradable signal. And good afternoon, Thiago. Always good to see you, my friend. Hope you had a great day trading. I know it was kind of a boring day, but fun morning with all those earnings, at least my nerdy definition of fun. I thought so. So I'll be watching that support and that resistance. We're going a little sideways at a trend line. To me, it seems like this is very undecided right now. I think you could make a case either way. So for me, make it break one way or the other, and then it's a lot easier to make whatever case you're trying to make, right? So no problem. Drive safe. Yeah, don't type at me while you're driving. So over in real estate, carrying on that momentum. Here from yesterday, breaking that little floor that we, was a pretty sizable, breakdown point, not a major level of support, but we did see some serious price action off of it. We took that out yesterday. We're kind of dealing with these flat moving averages, but no surprise, we were able to kind of fill up that space over here as well. Now we're kind of working with some old tops. I think this is a level of resistance worth noting and keeping an eye on where we are currently. If we can take that out, we clearly have established some nice momentum in the real estate sector as of late. If we can take that out, there is quite a bit of room. I'm going to turn this to a weekly chart really quick. And good afternoon, Marie. Great to see you as always. We're pretty sideways, right? If we look at this from a longer term perspective, right now we're kind of smack dab in the middle of this range. If we can take that out, there's not really a lot of resistance until we work back to 34. Just realistically, I'm not saying we should expect it to, just shoot straight up to that price. I'll never expect that. But just looking at resistance zones, we won't be dealing with any major levels of resistance until we approach that 33.50 to 34 range, which we've seen a lot of history on the real estate ETF in that ballpark. We haven't broke it yet. I would expect this to be a level of resistance worth respecting, keeping an eye on, however you want to call it. But again, solid movement. Again, we're just continuing to see these little bullish signals just kind of build, and that's been kind of what's happened with this entire rally. It's just kind of built slowly, right? Catch the moving average, break resistance, put in higher low, break a resistance level. So, it's definitely been an interesting one to follow. And over in communication services, I think the approach to take is probably very similar to what we discussed on XLY in the discretionary sector. I don't think we've taken out this trend yet. I don't personally think it's done enough to sell me that it has. And I will need to see that before I am comfortable being interested as a bull overall within this sector. But we're on the individual stock basis, we are seeing some positivity overall develop in things like Facebook and Google and Netflix, things like that. So, it can change my mind if it breaks. I will be, potentially very interested in, it's never broke, right? And whether, you think we've taken out that trend or not, it's close one way or the other, right? And that's never happened. So could be interesting. I don't think it's happened yet, personally. I would maybe like to see it wait and happen after earnings season. That would maybe be ideal, but maybe it takes an earnings season to decide one way or the other, for sure. So let's see. No, we got a 4. Thanks. Thiago's always. Don't solicit thumbs up for me, Thiago, while you're driving. I appreciate it for sure, but don't do it. So thank you though, Thiago. Always nice to be appreciated. So continue to watch that. And again, a lot of that's going to come down to where you have that trend line. I don't think it's broken it just yet, and I will continue to act accordingly personally. Over in the VIX, a little, we're starting to kind of see a little bit coming into it. On the other side, we've really seen a decrease during this bullish rally, and nothing dramatic, nothing really to note, I don't think. I'm not a huge VIX guy personally, but kind of flattening out, it looks like, for the time being. Our dollar working right back into that old 96 support range. This should be a respectable challenge, and if we do break back above that, I think you have to kind of go back into neutral, almost neutral bullish. I don't think, well, I guess it depends when it happens. If it happens tomorrow, probably I would just say neutral. But if we kind of grind this out over the next few days, I might say neutral to bullish. Right now, I do think that we continue to watch that 96 zone as an area of resistance. I don't think I'm ready to turn my tune just yet in the dollar, but 96 and 97.50 were very important for quite some time. Those are numbers definitely worth keeping an eye on. We're within some falling moving averages. We're at an old support zone. This should be a place where we see some selling. If we don't, pushing back into that range, probably going to be looking to go neutral once again. So we'll see where it takes us tomorrow. And good afternoon, Emily. Always nice to see you. Hope you had a great day. As we move into our metals, nothing too exciting going on for the most part as we continue to just drift, hang out within 1280 and 13 over in gold, seeing a little bit of intraday movement, but nothing really that's changed our charts by any means. 13 is, in my mind, a pretty good signal if we can break above that resistance level. But again, as we've talked before, we really had a good rally on gold from our first breakout point to our second. I thought this was a better trading opportunity personally, even though this was a great one, especially in hindsight. We've seen some good movement. It's not a bad thing that it needed to take a little time and hang out, right? Consolidating, developing that type of a pattern, maybe even ideal. So we're going to have to be patient at that 13, but I think it's worth watching, and I do think it's worth the wait. 1280 continues to be kind of our swing floor right now over in that market. Now in silver, interesting, we saw that little intraday floor develop over the last little while, very briefly. And this was a day trade for sure, but we took out that little intraday floor that we've been, developing, and we really sold. Now it was a very short short-term thing, right? Just, an hour and a half later, we broke back up above it. So, no real trend violation or anything like that. But I did think it was interesting. People in their floors, floors and ceilings, right? When it's easy to identify, lots of stop losses were probably hit there. Lots of, short-term intraday bearish trades were probably played there. And they had an opportunity to get in and out at a profit. They just had to be fast. I wasn't there, but I thought that was interesting. Not a whole lot has changed. We continue to kind of hold that same support, starting to get a little bit of a wedge going on here. So if we can push through this in the days to come, could be interesting. Haven't seen it yet. Numbers haven't really changed though. I mean, 16 is still kind of sitting right on top of us. Definitely something that we want to be keeping an eye on as we move forward. Over in natural gas. Okay, so yesterday, again, you guys know me and you know natural gas, so I wanted to stay in this range, and I guess I should have been more specific. Yesterday I said, hey, natural gas, go into a range here for a little bit, go back and forth between this support level and resistance level, and maybe we can get a tradable signal. It took that literally, and it went between that range today. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But yes, natural gas for you these days. Just one more data point, that this is a little bit of a range that we can be watching for. Still very volatile, a little too volatile for my taste as a swing trader. Again, for me, I'd love to see this go sideways in this range for a little while and then ultimately break whichever way it wants to. Still a very volatile market, but at least one more piece of information that we know where our short-term floor and our short-term ceiling is. So we've got that going for ourselves. But I just found it humorous when I looked at natural gas, and they took me at my word literally for the day at least. And lastly, over in the crude market, a little bit of more upward movement as we continue to show some positivity over there. Coming into an hourly chart here, kind of take a look and see where we're at after, kind of pulling back. We've got that little double bottom. We're working into some resistance in the form of that high that we put in on our daily chart. If we are, work into that, that can be a challenge from a short-term perspective. If we take that out, I think realistically, we're closing above the 50. We're above all resistance until we get to this swing in that 50, 54.70 to 55 range. Probably a good chance it's going to test it if we can, continue this momentum, in my opinion, at least breaking through that high point. That's not a lot of room, probably not a very, tradable situation. At least it probably wouldn't be for me. But I do expect if we take out that high that we put in last week, I do expect that we are going to get to challenge that approximately 55 level of resistance. And that's going to be an interesting one. I do think, that's a tradable signal above 55. And I still think below 50 is a tradable signal. I think the smart play is just let it do what it's going to do, wait for that signal, and if and when you get it, do whatever your trading rules tell you to do. So that's how I will be approaching it. Not anything different, but another solid little upward move over there. Numbers haven't changed though, and probably won't until they break one way or the other, right? So, wow, that was fast. We made it through faster than we usually do today. But a fun day in the market. I mean, kind of a weird day. So much, early action in the financials, and then really just a lot of flatlining throughout much of the rest of the day across the board. We did lose our dear friend PCG from the S&P 500. That was definitely coming. And Matt and Tim brought it up yesterday in the halftime report. Yeah, it's going to be kicked out eventually. And then this morning, there it was. So good timing, fellas. I know you're watching. So good timing, Matt and Tim. So ladies and gentlemen, anything quickly you guys wanted to take a peek at before I let you get out of here this afternoon? I'll give you guys just a second because I know you have a little bit of a delay when it comes to what I'm saying and what I'm seeing on the chat. While I do, as always, ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly my pleasure, and I do appreciate everybody's time. It's always great to have you guys with us over here on the Market Recap. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to kind of keep up with what we're doing over here on our YouTube channel. And be sure to follow us over at Tackle Trading on Twitter as well. Marie, it was a T, it's on the Twitter, I put it on the Tackle Twitter, TRX, something like that. It's a medical device company. It's right, it'll be on the Tackle Twitter pretty early in the day, but it's like TRX, I want to say is the ticker symbol, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just see, I'll probably know it when I see it. No, it's not TRX. So TCX maybe. So it's on the Twitter, and that will go through on Friday. So that will be when we officially move into switch that out. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, and I am still putting together our team tackle Twitter list. So if I've missed you, yell at me on Twitter. I will get you added to that for sure. So let me know so we can find even more ways to continue to hang out with each other. As some of us, like Abel and myself, we're kind of Twitter noobs, right, Abel? But we're getting it figured out. So slowly but surely. If you enjoy the market recap, guys, it is always helpful and appreciated if you do give it a thumbs up to let us know that it is helpful and let YouTube know that we're on the right track as well. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is always my pleasure. You guys have a great rest of the day. Happy trading, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.